All right, so this is something that I haven't really had the chance to cover recently, mostly because of time, but also because it's just like a torrential downpour of the same exact thing on repeat coming from conservatives as a part of this ongoing hysterical reaction to the existence of gay and trans people here in the United States. And, for those of you who have been keeping up with this, I mean, there have been just boycotts after boycotts against all sorts of different companies for all sorts of different things, basically just corporate virtue signaling, right? We call this marketing, essentially, right? It's not as if they're like ideologically in line with, some sort of a progressive agenda or anything like that. It's just virtue signaling. And so conservatives have been just absolutely losing their minds over this over the last couple of months. I mean, this is their big thing that sort of took the mantle after, CRT and critical race theory sort of faded into the background, although that's also making a reappearance here. So we're going to go through a couple recent videos and some recent articles about some of these boycotts. But first, I just want to start off here with Donald Trump to put this in perspective for everybody in terms of this freak out over gay and trans people. So here we have Donald Trump giving a speech in Greensboro, North Carolina, where he pretty much, as usual, says the quiet part out loud and admits that, he doesn't really necessarily care about this big anti-trans or anti-gay wave of legislation that has been passed around the country or any of that, but he just wants to use this as a wedge issue in order to motivate his, rabid supporters. So let's just go ahead and watch this quick little clip here.
In critical race theory, transgender insanity, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. It's amazing how strongly people feel about that. You see, I'm talking about cutting taxes, people go like that. Talk about transgender, everyone goes crazy. Who would have thought 5 years ago you didn't know what the hell it was? But one thing critical.
Okay, so I mean, again, this is the same guy who back in 2016 during that presidential election cycle was holding up a gay pride flag, okay? And now he's turning around and he's saying the quiet part out loud and admitting that this is just the culture war battle that conservatives have chosen for this moment in time, right? And he's saying, I could be talking about some substantive issues like tax cuts, which obviously I wouldn't even agree with. I mean, his most serious legislative accomplishment when he was president was giving a massive tax cut to billionaires and corporations. But, he's saying I could be talking about tax cuts, I could be talking about healthcare or education or whatever the case may be, more substantive issues, foreign policy or whatever. And instead of talking about any of those things, because those don't seem to be motivating my supporters, I talk about CRT and trans women in sports, okay? That's what he's talking about. Not because it's something that he's firmly ideologically standing behind, but just because it gets people riled up. It is very easy to pick out scapegoats within society, whether that's people in the LGBTQ community, whether that's immigrants, whether that's black people. This is something that has been on repeat for the entirety of the history of the United States of America and around the world. This is what reactionaries do. This is what fascists do. This is what many conservatives do, is instead of actually addressing the material needs, the economic needs of average working class people, they sort of dangle a keychain in front of them and say, hey, look over here at this shiny object. Corporate America, the billionaire class, they're not your actual problem. They're not your actual enemies. Capitalism isn't your enemy. It's actually gay people or trans people who are trying to propagandize your kids into becoming gay or trans, okay? So that's the game that is being played right now, and Trump just sort of comes out and admits it. Okay, so we have that. So there's the game that they're playing. Now let's get a little bit into the actual game itself, because this has just gotten to a level where I am almost certain, unless we go down an even more dark path than I'm anticipating in this country, that in a couple of years from now, 5-10 years out, people are going to look back at clips like this and be like, you guys are a bunch of paranoid freaks. Okay, so here we have Charlie Kirk, okay, of, this organization, the, what's it called? The Turning Point USA. Okay, so he's going to give us, a little bit of a glimpse into his day-to-day life and how he is going about living it. I can't even, prelude this clip. Let's just go ahead and watch this real quick.
The show is brought to you by Blackout Coffee. It is powered by Blackout Coffee. Family-owned, 100% committed to conservative values, from sourcing the beans to the roasting process. Customer support, go to blackoutcoffee.com/Charlie. That is blackoutcoffee.com/Charlie. Super happy to partner with them. 100% endorsement. Check it out for all your coffee needs. We are now having to, I'm guilty of this. I'm going through my kitchen, I'm going through my refrigerator, and I'm starting to ask the question, well, is this ketchup bottle woke? Is this mustard? I mean, literally, we're at the place now where we have to go through, is the company that makes this? And so, blackoutcoffee.com/Charlie, I'm sure.
Okay, so now maybe he was being a little bit sarcastic there, but was he? I mean, if you look at how Charlie Kirk conducts himself when he talks about these issues, if you look at Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles and Candace Owens and the rest of these prominent conservative pundits, okay, Steven Crowder as well, Ben Shapiro, look at how they talk about this issue. This is not far off, okay? He's not really making a joke here, okay? Because this is what conservatives have been doing with all of these boycotts recently, is they are genuinely questioning the reality surrounding them as to whether or not, because some corporation that produces some product decided to do corporate virtue signaling to say that, hey, we're okay with gay and trans people, or we are producing products that are, geared towards or marketed towards gay and trans people, that therefore this product is now like spoiled, or it should be off limits, or that we should boycott this product. Okay, he's talking about ketchup and mustard, okay, hot dog condiments being woke. Okay, as if he has to excise all of these different products that are even tangentially connected to anybody who said gay people are okay. All right, he has to excise those from his life. I guess the narrative would then be because otherwise maybe he or his children or anybody in the near vicinity of him would immediately become gay and trans at the same time or something like that. But I mean, just to give you more of a perspective in terms of the depths of some of these boycotts here. So here from NBC News, how major brands were forced into the conservative plan to target LGBTQ people. They say Target, Bud Light, the Dodgers, and Disney have all been backed into a corner over their support of the LGBTQ community. The strategy has conservative activists celebrating. So we have had boycotts of Bud Light, Target, the Dodgers, Disney, and now apparently Chick-fil-A as well. Okay, so just to spend like a second on one of these, just for example, okay, Target, okay, they were mad because they had for, Pride Month that's happening right now in June, right? They had some displays that had like rainbow flags on kids' t-shirts, right? And then they had some, products that were marketed towards specifically trans people. And they are taking that to mean like, you are now shoving this down our throats. Okay, not that they would ever say the same about any other sort of branding, right? As if, okay, we have the American flag on a t-shirt in a Target, therefore you're spreading like, nationalist propaganda to our children and you're grooming them or something like that. No, it only applies to this segment. Let me tell you something, okay? If you go to a Target, and I've been to a Target, I went to a Target this week, okay? You go to a Target, you see a Pride section, you're not interested in those products, you can just walk like 10, 15 feet. And then you're going to be in a different section that's selling completely different things that may be more interesting to you. Okay, that's the extent of it. All right, I actually just went to Target. I bought my dog a toy that happened to have a rainbow flag on it, and now I guess my dog is gay. Okay, that's the reality that conservatives want us to be living in. All right, Bud Light, same thing. There was some trans activist named Dylan Mulvaney who was doing a specific like one-off advertisement with Bud Light. Conservatives saw that advertisement and had an entire freak out about it. We had like Kid Rock getting out an AR-15 and shooting cans of Bud Light that he'd already purchased, but shooting cans of Bud Light out of frustration at Bud Light for doing like one Instagram advertisement with a trans person. Okay, that's where we're at in this country. And again, Chick-fil-A, one of the most well-known like conservative brands in the country. This restaurant, okay, and we talk all the time about the influences of capitalism and maximizing profits and all of that, and the extent to which corporations will go to maximize their profits. Chick-fil-A closes on a weekend day. They close on Sunday because of their religious Christian affiliations. Okay, this is one of the most right-wing organizations you could possibly ask for, but now apparently it's gone woke because they had some sort of like DEI, some diversity and inclusion, program within their company. Now apparently Chick-fil-A needs to be boycotted over that. I mean, it's absolutely hysterical. A couple more examples here. Now, granted, these are just memes that are posted on Twitter, but they're going pretty viral. This one has 22,000 favorites here on Twitter from conservatives. And as you can see here, I mean, this is from one of these Quentin Tarantino movies, I think it was. I'm blanking on the name, even though this is like one of my favorite movies of all time. But basically, this is a Nazi who's sitting right here. And they got a quote here saying, society is going to be so futuristic in 2030, society in 2030. And we got a quote here from the Nazi, who in this case is apparently, an LGBTQ supporter, right? He says, "You're sheltering straight people under the floorboards, aren't you?" Okay, and it's from a scene in the movie where this Nazi goes and he's trying to find Jewish people who are under the floorboards hiding within this farmhouse. Okay, so now you are a Nazi if you're supportive of the LGBTQ community, because what? In 10 years, in less than 10 years, in 2030, we're going to have, bands of armed people who are roaming the streets trying to target straight people who are not members of the LGBTQ community. I'm not a member of the LGBTQ community, okay? I don't feel threatened by gay or trans people. You know who I do feel threatened by? People who agree with memes like this. People who think that, we need to have a massive reactionary backlash to the existence of gay and trans people because they think that this is the oppression that they are facing. That, to me, is actually kind of alarming. Another one here, okay, is pointed out here by Logan Hall. Now, this one has 28,000 favorites on Twitter. The slippery slope fallacy. Okay, so we have this slope that's going slightly down here. Just let them get married. How does this affect you personally? And then it drops off. 10 years later, plummets to the ground. And now we have state-enforced homosexuality. I'm sorry, what? I must have missed the announcement on this. I must have missed the memo on this. Are we all now gay? Are we all now homosexuals? Is that what's happening now? The Biden administration is enforcing everybody. They're going around at gunpoint to everybody's house and they're saying, "Are you gay? Are you having enough gay sex? Have you sucked enough dicks today?" Okay, that's what's happening in the minds of these people. Because what? Because Joe Biden during Pride Month threw up a pride flag on the White House. That's what we're at right now. This is the position that we are at right now. This is the equivalent. Flying a flag, doing a little bit of virtue signaling from the White House is now the equivalent of state-enforced homosexuality. It's just amazing. Here from End Wokeness, which is one of the single largest, right-wing reactionary accounts on Twitter, okay, they say the West has fallen. The West has fallen. And again, they show a picture here of Biden in front of a pride flag. We have, more pride flags just hanging up in a city. Okay, just absolutely terrifying. More pride flags hanging up in a city. Oh, a pride, rainbow of balloons. Okay, this is what they're terrified of. This is not only what they're terrified of, this is what they think is going to lead to the collapse of Western civilization. According to End Wokeness, now apparently this has already collapsed Western civilization. And I replied to this tweet and it ended up going viral. But what my response was is basically listen, man, even accepting your premise that this would cause Western civilization to crumble, if that's the case, if a couple rainbow flags, if the existence of LGBTQ people can collapse Western civilization, it was never meant to stand. Give up on it. Let's move past it. Let's progress as a society. Maybe we can do better than a civilizational structure that is so fragile that a balloon rainbow, apparatus that they put up here is capable of destroying it in its entirety. Okay? This is where their mindset is at. And so it basically just comes down to this. This is a meme that's been floating around on Twitter, and basically a lot of people use it in response to these kinds of tweets that are coming out from End Wokeness and the rest of the ones we just looked at. And I mean, this is just the reality that conservatives live in right now, right? On the one hand, we have somebody like Donald Trump who's kind of honest about it, but not really honest about it. And he'll at least come out and say, I'm only saying these things. I'm going with this anti-trans agenda, this anti-gay agenda, because that's what my supporters want, right? So he'll be kind of a quarter of, a percent honest about it. But then this is the reality that all of the rest of these conservatives are living with, right? Charlie Kirk is going through his refrigerator questioning if the ketchup and mustard that he has is going to turn him gay. That's where we're at right now. This is the fantasy land that conservatives live in. And so, on the one hand, it's kind of fun to make fun of these people, right? And this world that they've constructed for themselves of some manufactured oppression that they are absolutely not facing, But then it's also pretty alarming, right? Because we're talking about actual dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of pieces of legislation that have been passed around the country, specifically targeted against LGBTQ people, right? The book bans, banning, trans kids from participating in sports, right? There was that one bill that we talked about in Utah that literally only applied to 4 kids in the entire state. And they were no, specifically, fuck you 4 kids. You shouldn't be able to go and socialize and play with your friends in a sport because that would, I don't know, destroy the entirety of the women's sports, complex, which is a whole different conversation we could get into. I have many opinions on, trans people participating in sports, but we could get into that at a later date. But then another thing that is never brought up in these conversations, which I think is like one of the most important parts, is that the whole selling pitch of this anti-LGBTQ wave that conservatives have been fronting recently, the entire underpinning of it is that this is somehow like grooming, or this is pedophilia directed towards children. Meanwhile, okay, we have absolutely no evidence whatsoever that there's some sort of broad structure of drag queens or trans people who are targeting kids and abusing them or anything like that. We have no evidence of that in any way, shape, or form, right? But on the flip side, we do have evidence that there's widespread abuse that has and still is taking place within, like, for example, the Catholic Church. Okay, there was just another recent report that came out. I mean, we've seen just report after report after report, so it's kind of hard to keep up with, but we've had reports out of France, out of Italy, out of the United States, out of every single city and parish in the United States. Okay, and I came from a religious upbringing, right? I went to Catholic school throughout the entirety of my life. These churches are the ones who are actually, giving you a full frontal, example here of what it looks like to have systematic abuse of children, and then a cover up after the fact, and then the perpetuation of that abuse by this organizational structure when they shuffle around priests to different locations and don't report it to the police and don't actually pursue any sort of actual accountability, right? That's what you would focus on if you cared about kids, right? I mean, there are so many different things we could talk about. Sex education is another one. Now conservatives apparently have an issue with teaching, elementary school kids through the normal process that everybody that I know went through of learning about sexual education, right? And they say, oh no, that's actually grooming children. When the actual data that we have on this shows that, number one, it reduces the likelihood of people getting STDs, right, at a young age, reduces the likelihood of teenage pregnancies, again, okay? And then on the third hand, also reduces the likelihood that kids are going to be abused with complete impunity, because that actually gives them the education, the knowledge to be able to understand when they are being abused and to be able to report that confidently. So, I mean, like, every single aspect of this is just obviously delusional. It's obviously ridiculous. It's obviously alarming at so many different levels, but this is the world that conservatives have constructed for themselves. And so we saw in 2022, they did a heavy focus on this kind of culture war battlefront. Didn't really work out for them that well, but certainly, I mean, this is not something that's going away in the near future. So we're going to have to keep dealing with this. We're going to have to keep talking about this. We're going to have to keep, battling for just basic rights for LGBTQ people in this country. But this is where we're at. So I'll certainly keep you guys updated as we get further updates on the deranged fantasy land that a lot of these people are living in.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying